biggest game of the year right here. They're trying to come into our house and take something from us. There's no way, all right? Dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
It all started with a decision. Robert Morris President Nicholson was forced to make a choice. The school's enrollment was low and the college was in one of its most desperate places. So the administration came together with a plan. In 1993, President Nicholson stepped up to the podium, and what he said would change the entire course of Robert Morris.
Are you ready? Are you ready?
It's my pleasure today to announce that after nearly 1 year of study and analysis, last week the Robert Morris College trustees have approved the intercollegiate football program proposed by the administration, beginning in 1994-95 academic year.
He was an All-American at Pitt. He played 8 years with the Redskins and spent 35 years in professional football as either a player, a coach, or a scout. And he spent 7 years with the New York Jets and most recently with the Steelers as an offensive coordinator. So at this time, I'd like to introduce our first football coach at Robert Morris, Coach Joe Walton.
In my whole career as a coach, I have loved challenge, and I think this is a tremendous challenge. I think everybody here at Robert Morris is committed to building this program. We will have some very fine student athletes, I'm sure, that want to continue playing football, and those are the young people that we'll be looking to recruit and to be a part of our program.
It's kind of an interesting story. I mean, when it first happened that President Nicholson at the time and the Board of Trustees decided to have a football team, I think what they were trying to do is just raise the enrollment by a couple of hundred kids. And there were all these rumors circulating around about who might want to be the first head football coach at Robert Morris. And there were a lot of names of high school football coaches in the area who were interested. And I think the university was thinking, nah, maybe we'll find a college coach who's at the end of his career, or maybe an up-and-coming assistant coach who will take this as a stepping stone and advance it. And then all of a sudden, people in the area started talking about who might be available with a big name. And Joe Walton's name came up. And Joe had gone back into the business that he was doing while he was playing for the Giants, and that was the moving business. He was working for a moving company.
First of all, you announced that you're going to have a program, which we did in, I think I was actually in, well, that Joe came on board in '93 actually. Yeah. So we announced the program early in the summer of '93. Dr. Nicholson announced the program, and then yeah, the first step is hiring a coach. You know, Joe was no longer with the Steelers and out of the NFL by '91, and I know he was working in the private sector and obviously still had a hankering for being involved with football. He said, you know, he wanted to be around football, and he never tried college before and wanted to try it. So I guess he decided to start with building a program which didn't have a single shoelace to begin. Didn't have a football, didn't have a field, didn't have a helmet, didn't have a locker room, didn't have an equipment room, nothing.
In terms of the resources that the university had for their newest football program, it appeared that it truly was the definition of starting from scratch.
When they announced that they were going to start a football program, one of the first things they wanted to do is get a picture of Joe with a Robert Morris sweatshirt on and a Robert Morris hat. And they said, okay, where's the ball? And they didn't have a football. So somebody from the athletic department had to run up to either Dick's Sporting Goods or Kmart or somewhere and go buy a ball, because they wanted to get his picture taken with his football, and they didn't have one.
Back then, the guys just get 2 pairs of t-shirts, 2 t-shirts, 2 pairs of cotton workout shorts, 2 pairs of socks, and they would get hand-me-down Jets cleats. We used to have the Jets old like '94 game pants was our practice gear. You know, a lot of times we would just get boxes of stuff that would show from the Jets, from Coach Walton's connection there.
But to President Edward Nicholson and the rest of the administration, it didn't matter because they found their man to lead the charge, and they were willing to do whatever Coach Walton needed.
Well, when they budgeted, you know, when you're starting a new program, you know, the Board of Trustees budgeted how much they thought the first year cost would be. And I went to Ed and I said, we got a problem. And he said, you know, what's the matter? And I told him, I said, well, we budgeted for those 60 or 70 players, whatever it was. And I said, we had 157 show up yesterday. And he said, oh, well, we'll take care of it.
When I first started in '97, our locker room was over in John Jay. Apparently, when they started the program, there used to be an indoor pool over at John Jay, and they filled in the pool to make the football locker room. So our equipment room was connected right to next door to the locker room. It was our claim to fame was one of the only equipment rooms in the country that had skylights, because they still left the skylights from the pool up in there. We used to practice up on the field where the chapel is now, and the nursing building. That used to be originally the softball field up there, and so we used to use the outfield as our field. We only had an 80-yard field. Anytime it rained, we'd have to go up there 2 hours before practice and shovel puddles of water out. And then if it didn't rain for, you know, a week or two, the field would be so dry it was just like a giant dust bowl.
To the players who were at the forefront of this pioneering new program, it was certainly an adjustment from their big-time college program expectations to a school who at the time didn't even have its own football field, and who even had to take a bus to travel to their own home games.
Different, because you know, obviously, of course, you come to college, you know, you're expecting to play at this, you know, this big stadium, and at that time they were saying, hey, this is where, you know, our future stadium's going to be, and things like that. And then you go to step on the field for that first game, and you're at high school all over again. So it was like kind of an all and an awkward all in the same sentence.
So we drive the yellow school buses. Everybody drop off, go into the visiting locker room. So when you went to Moon, they have the varsity locker room, and then they have underneath the visitor stands was the visitor locker room, and that's where we dressed, the visitor locker room. So the away team had the actual nicer locker room than us, because we didn't need showers. We'd just come back after the game and jump on the yellow school buses and drive back to campus and shower. So, I mean, for some of the guys, there was probably some complaints at first, but it just became part of the routine, right?
Despite the lack of amenities that most Division I college programs brought along with them, what made this team a contender right out of the gate was their fearless leader, Joe Walton, who certainly made an immediate impact on both his players and his fellow coaches.
Coach and how he goes about his business, the consistency, having a high standard, the detail of our preparation, was just lessons that I take with me every day, even all the way here, 22 years later now. Watching how he handled certain situations, whether it was maybe a bus broke down on the road, or maybe the food wasn't right at the hotel, to maybe we don't have water at certain parts of the practice. Just things that we had scheduled, and watch how he adjusted from very small issues to maybe big issues of how things are going in the game. Are we getting, you know, how are these referees? How's the weather? What are we doing that's working, not working? All those things too that are kind of get that feel for how to make those adjustments.
When you walked on campus, it was very different with him. No matter if you were an 18-year-old freshman or a 22-year-old senior, like, it was a very professional atmosphere. Like, he treated you like he did the pros. So it's a very different practice, very different rhythm. You didn't like go and hurt each other and try to tackle. You know, they always did things very professional. You went over a lot of details.
Coach he's feisty. He was a lot shorter than I thought on seeing him on TV. But he was, he had his system, and he was going to do it his way.
He could have come in here and sort of big-timed us from the start, like, this is how we did it in the NFL. So never once did he do that. He realized where he was. I think he's always sort of been grounded in his upbringing. So he was humble. He knew what he was doing, so you pretty much, it wasn't what you had to worry about. He picked up on the culture right away of, hey, I'm not coaching pros anymore. I don't have them in the facility from 7 in the morning until 5 at night. I got kids who will come in at 3 o'clock. We practice for 2 hours.
They knew, they got the perception and the feeling that he cared for them, and they cared for him as well. I mean, they wanted to run through walls when he wanted them to, and you know, they hold him in high regard. He's a very special person. There's something about Joe, when you talk to him, people these days have a tendency of, when they talk to somebody, they kind of look away, or, you know, they're looking around and they don't want to make eye contact because people in general are shy. But when you talk to Joe Walton, he would look you straight into your eyes, and he would focus on both of your eyes. And if you were doing the talking, he would absolutely not take his eyes off your eyeballs.
I got to RMU because Coach Walton had taken the job here, and he and I had coached together at the New York Jets, and I happened to be out of a job.
Now that Coach Walton was at the helm, he had to assemble both a team and a staff, and the very first hire he made would have the most lasting impact on his legacy at Robert Morris. That man was the opposite to Coach Walton in nearly every way, from his demeanor to his tendencies and everything in between. This man was defensive coordinator Dan Radakovich, better known as Bad Rad.
Joe is extremely organized. Everything has a time and a place. And I'm not going to say that Rad's not that way, but he's a little unconventional. When the feeling hit Rad, he would pull out a dry erase board and get his markers. And I'm talking about road trips on the buses. He would pull this dry erase board out, he'd get on the bus microphone that the tour guide usually uses, and Rad would say, "Okay, back there, everybody awake?" And he was a little unconventional and slightly eccentric, but a genius when it came to football.
They were the perfect complement to each other. So Coach was very by the book, write every single note down that he was going to discuss. He was very thorough in it. It's not like he didn't micromanage us, but he was just so meticulous to make sure every detail was laid out on exactly what he accomplished. Rad, we're lucky if he had one sheet of paper all rolled up and would make decisions on the fly based on what he would see. So he would be sort of like the mad scientist.
Well, if you want to go a step further, Joe went to Pitt and Rad Penn State. So maybe opposites attract. You know, you could see when they got in a room together and started talking football that there was a clicking there, there was a meshing there, and I think that must have been what it was. Joe was offense, Rad was defense.
Me and Rad is one of my favorite people ever. He demanded a lot of me, but he helped make me the player I was. He was always on you, but Rad was one of them dudes. He didn't care if you messed around, if you played during practice, as long as you took care of business when you had to. He was fine.
Yeah, Coach Walton and Coach Rad were, we used to joke around and call them the odd couple.
Well, we're not very much alike. You know, I love Rad, but he can be difficult at times. He's a character, but he does know football, and a very good recruiter. He has a way with kids. He has a way with people, and he knows football.
When it came to recruiting for this new program, Walton and Rad were willing to go anywhere and do anything to get the best they could get their hands on, and it certainly didn't go unnoticed.
It's a lot of diligence, a lot of effort. I mean, you're on the phone and you're trying to bring in those visits, trying to get academic people to get us some packages that'll compete. But it was a lot of long days and long nights, and I mean, that was what our job was, and we were committed to do it.
We came out for a visit. I actually talked to Rad. He had his 4 Super Bowl rings in a Ziploc bag, and he threw them on the table and said, "Take a look at these." I'm like, all right.
When I started, actually, I think what drew me to the situation was the fact that it was new. And certainly Coach Walton was a big draw for that. If it had been any other new situation with an unproven coach, I think that probably would have been less appealing for me.
I'd say Joe Walton was a big contributor to that. Being what he had accomplished, before meeting us, was just a true wow factor. Being able to say, okay, hey, I'll be, learning from, a coach that is coached in the NFL.
Coach Bernie, who's since passed on, he was the track and field coach, and I ended up winning WPIL and javelin my senior year. So they offered me they threw a little money at me and offered me a room and board scholarship, for track. And I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be cheaper to come here, and I get to play 2 sports.
I was from Cleveland, and it's Cleveland area. It's pretty poor here, and my parents didn't have a lot of money. So the big schools that wanted me, the West Virginias and Pitts and all them, told me I had to pay my first year. And Robert Morris told me, well, if I come there, they'll work something out where I didn't have to pay.
Well, I think I will admit, we sold that we were pro coaches, Brad and I, that we were going to use the same playbook, same defensive book, same playbook that we used in the NFL. I think also the contacts we had with the NFL and the people we knew attracted some of the players because they figured, if I can do anything, I might have a shot.
He treated us like men. He expected us to act accordingly. He gave us a huge playbook. He decided, he wanted us to plan and have everything kind of in order, in line, executed, and follow through with it as such.
Typical football coach. Gruff when he needed to be, lovable when he knew it was time to be lovable, a very caring person. He cared about his players, he cared about his team, he cared about winning, and he cared about making sure people were on the same page. He was very, very strict. He was demanding as a football coach as far as knowing the playbook. From what I could see from my vantage point high above the field, and from talking with him time and time again during all those great seasons, he really cared about the players. He wanted to make sure that they understood what the coaching staff wanted them to do. He wanted them to know their jobs and to do their jobs out there on the football field.
After a year of diligent recruiting, scheduling, and building a program, it was finally time for the team's very first game. With unknown expectations, Walton and his men went up against the Waynesburg Yellow Jackets.
Nobody knew what was going to happen. Everybody thought, oh man, this is, these kids never played a game together. We're going to go to Waynesburg, and Waynesburg was a D3 team at the time, and here we are, and we're trying to start a 1AA football team, and you've got to crawl before you can walk, so let's open up with Waynesburg. And everybody thought it doesn't matter that they're a D3 team. They've been playing football for 100 years here.
The Colonial offense was anchored by the play of 6'1", 180-pound freshman quarterback Jake Newman from Powell, Ohio. In the Colonials' first ever game against Waynesburg, Newman was spectacular, completing 13 of 21 for 216 yards and 3 touchdowns. It was evident early that Newman's favorite target was 6'4", 205-pound junior transfer wide receiver Rob Frazier, one of 3 transfers from Kemper Military Academy on the team.
The game came down to the final drive. It came down to a goal line stand, and we weren't sure how to feel. And Robert Morris ended up winning the game 24-19.
They had great energy, and excitement, and they wanted to play and they wanted to learn. And going to Waynesburg, we were hoping to make some kind of showing, and we didn't know. we really didn't.
That day, as I recall, Jake Newman opened up the offense through the air, and Rob Frazier was catching unbelievable passes. He was the first big star for Robert Morris, Rob Frazier. And they threw the ball a lot that day. Tim Hall was on the team, and Tim ran well. He didn't have 100 yards that day. They won. They won the game. couldn't believe it.
I remember, you know, Rad, I'd say, well, what do you think? And he'd always say, you know as much as I do. I don't know what they're going to do. He said, we'll see.
The following week against Monmouth, in RMC's first ever home game, Newman was even more amazing, completing 22 of 29 for 298 yards and 3 touchdowns. Frazier was on the receiving end of 7 of those Newman completions, including 2 more touchdowns to give him 4 after only 2 games. The game also saw the emergence of 6-foot, 215-pound fullback Tim Hall, also a junior transfer from Kemper. Hall caught 7 passes out of the backfield and showed he could definitely run after catching the ball, gaining 114 yards receiving, including a 70-yard touchdown catch. But Hall was just giving the RMC crowd a small preview of things to come, as the Colonials grounded the Monmouth Hawks by a score of 26-19.
You know, they beat Monmouth, and if there were another 2 seconds left in that game, Monmouth would have won. And I'm talking about the first home game in the history of Robert Morris football. They played Monmouth at Moon Stadium. Monmouth had the ball and tried to snap it at the end of the game, and would have gone in for a touchdown, except the clock expired and the officials stopped and said, that's it, you didn't snap it in time. Then they beat Central Connecticut State, had to go up there to play them. Then they played Gannett at home and shut them out 28-0. And you look up and you figure, okay, this is a brand new football team and they're 5-0. They are a perfect 5-0. It was just unbelievable. Game 6 was really interesting because it was the first time Robert Morris and Duquesne ever played.
What could become a long bitter rivalry in this city, the Duquesne Dukes arrived at Moon Stadium at 4-0 and poised to be the first to knock off the Robert Morris Colonials. But the only thing they could really say at the end was that they kept Tim Hall out of the end zone. Still, Hall continued his string of 100-yard gains, grinding out 117 yards on the ground. But the Colonials turned to the passing game for their victory over the Dukes. Jake Newman was simply dazzling as he went 16 for 31 for 228 yards and 4 touchdowns, including 3 to his bread and butter, Rob Frazier. Newman also completed 7 passes to his tight end, Greg Bussey, and Andrew Dorsey, who both played consistently well throughout the season. Bussey, a 6'4", 225-pound freshman from Reston, Virginia, had 5 catches for 75 yards. Dorsey, a 6'4", 240-pound sophomore from Stowe Rocks High School, added 2 catches, including a 12-yard touchdown catch in the 4th quarter. The Colonials' defense came up big again as Nate List led the way with 12 tackles and a fumble recovery. The third of the Kemper transfers, 6', 215-pound strong safety, Piante Crew, added 10 tackles. Crew would go on to be the Colonials' defensive leader in most categories when the season was all said and done. 6'1", 190-pound freshman linebacker Fred Manilak from Steubenville, Ohio, added 4 tackles to the Colonial cause and 3 quarterback sacks as Robert Morris beat the Dukes 28-6.
And there were 8,016 fans at Moon Stadium. I don't know why. I always remember that number.
Well, the Duquesne games were always fun because, and I imagine they still are for the kids, because crosstown rivalry and, to that point, we'd gotten some publicity, but we got even more, playing Duquesne.
Undefeated seasons in football are extremely hard because of injuries, bad bounces, and just plain bad luck. The Colonial team finally met fate when they traveled to Staten Island, New York, as they lost 38-21 to the Wagner Seahawks.
This Wagner club was loaded. They were ready for us, and Joe was the head coach of the New York Jets and left there unceremoniously. There were banners in the end zone at the Meadowlands where the Jets played saying, "Where's the O, Joe?" when their offense was sputtering. And then there were banners that said, "Joe must go." And some jackass, some jackass Jets fan knew that the former head coach was coming in, so he hung one of those "Joe must go" banners in the end zone at Wagner.
I remember just walking through with security through the fans, and they did have the signs. There were some very choice words. ESPN2 was live there, covering us just walking onto the field because we were undefeated. And in all my 4 years, in every year of high school, I've never got beaten up so bad by a team. I mean, they came ready to play. They were big, they were strong, and they just, like always, they punched us in the mouth and they beat us up. And it was a real eye-opener. And unfortunately, Wagner that year, because they beat us, ended up going to the ECAC Bowl that year, not us.
The following week, the Colonials came from behind to tie St. Francis of PA 14-all. Rumors about the Colonials possibly gaining a bowl bid dependent on the outcome of their 2 final games began to abound, and Robert Morris would end its home season in triumphant form. Tim Hall was in immaculate form that day, gaining an incredible 278 yards on 22 carries and 4 touchdowns, becoming RMC's first ever 1,000-yard rusher. RMC dominated the Bethany Bisons by the score of 38-14. Then Robert Morris traveled on to Mercyhurst to overcome a 14-0 first quarter deficit to simply manhandle the Lakers 37-27 to end the season at 7-1-1. And while bowl officials chose the Wagner Seahawks over the Colonials for the ECAC Bowl, RMC gained an incredible amount of confidence and respect for a bright future and ending the long journey that was the first of many for the RMC squad.
In their inaugural season, the Colonials weren't just good, they were absolutely sensational. Winning their first 5 games, the Colonials finished with a record of 7-1-1. It seemed as though, despite the long processes most new teams go through to find success, that in their first season, the Robert Morris Colonials had already arrived to the scene. Heading into the 1996 season, the 3rd season in the program's history, it was much of the same. Despite having their star running back Tim Hall leave for the NFL draft, Jake Newman and the Colonials were absolutely dominant, marching themselves all the way to the ECAC Bowl against inner-city rival Duquesne. The team would lay claim to their first ever ACAC championship and their first Northeast Conference title in the NEC's inaugural season. And for many within the athletics department, it was finally recognition that they felt they had earned.
Well, the feeling was that we have a football team. And the thing is, I think that was a feeling in the first season as well. And it was just a continuation. It was a feather in the cap that they went out there and won that first Northeast Conference championship. At that time, you know, Robert Morris was the signature team in the Northeast Conference. And these guys had a swagger. I mean, the players had a swagger. The coaches kind of had a swagger too, although they were trying to, you know, make sure that everybody was nice and calm and settled. But they did. They truly had a swagger, and they ran roughshod over the rest of the conference.
First time I ever won a championship. I had tears in my eyes. I've never won anything all through high school. So we won a championship. Well, so it was mud and snow up there at St. Francis, and then we get done showering and one of the buses breaks down. We can't even go. So they say, hey, get everybody on one bus. So you have 55 players plus all the staff on one old school DeBolt bus. So some of the people notice, hey, the equipment van, the giant sort of moving truck, has room in the back. So some of the coaches and some of the players decided to ride in the back of that and, you know, celebrate on the way home and things like that. So I'll just give that, yeah, everybody had a good time after that game.
I've been in this game for 30-some years, 36, 37 years. I couldn't be more proud of a bunch of kids in my whole life. That defensive stand we made down there. I think we ought to kneel and thank God for what we've achieved.
I think first and foremost, it was the coaching staff that was assembled. I mean, we clearly had not only a schematic advantage, but I think also just a leadership and an experience advantage. The coaches that they were able to recruit to their staff were guys that wouldn't likely have gone to other starter programs, and that was because of the relationships that Coach Walton and Radikovich had with those guys. And so I think that, from the head coach down, that's in a great position.
But here's a guy who has all this experience and put together this football team, and everybody just felt so much better about themselves. People associated either as players or the staff on the football team. And it gets to the fact that Joe Walton made everybody feel better.
The team continued their upward climb in the 1997 season when the Colonials finished the regular season 7-3 with a perfect 4-0 record in conference play, claiming their second straight NEC title. That would earn Walton and his squad the right to head to Washington, D.C. to take on the Georgetown Hoyas. The one catch? The Hoyas football field was on top of a parking garage in downtown D.C.
There's been some interesting places we've played at, but Georgetown is right up there. When we get there and, we hear how tough they are, and we get there and it's all turf and it looks pretty nice and you realize you're on top of a building playing. And the stands are so far away. I mean, it was like playing a game with no one there. So, yeah, it was very interesting. It was very breezy up there, but another win. It was another big game. It was rainy. It was sort of like today, like rainy, cold outside, but it was a lot of fun. So that was our last official game together as a team. Everybody celebrated, a lot of parents there. So, we took a lot of time in the parking lot, hanging out. People brought food and drinks, and we just celebrated, and we knew that this was sort of, the original RMC guys' last hurrah together. Setting the foundation. People could say Tim Hall, the championships, but a lot of people don't like to say this, but I'll be brutally honest, Robert Morris football was created to help enrollment. That's the God honest truth. They wanted to increase the enrollment here. What better way to throw a football team together? Not only would it bring more students here, but it's going to bring more students athletes. So thankfully we won, but we set the foundation.
And 32-3 in the conference since this conference started. So don't let the other guys down that played before you.
The 1998 season was one that for RMC standard was below average. The team claimed its third straight NEC title but finished the season just 4 and 6. All that would be forgotten thanks to an incredible 1999 campaign. After starting 1-2, the Colonials would win their final 7 games to claim their first mid-major national championship. But even greater than the title was the expectations that carried into the 2000 season. Expectations of perfection and something truly spectacular.
When you start a program in '94, you're starting the program again in '98. So now your second generation of players are now juniors, and so yeah, that was definitely. I think expectations were high.
We can be better. We can, we lost a couple games last year and we went on a streak, and then we can be better.
We set it very high. We knew that we could get to a championship if we did well, and we had to pretty much have a clean sweep type of season to make that playoff run. We could change the culture here at Robert Morris, being that if we can run the table and get that opportunity, that we could pretty much set a standard across the NCAA for mid-major, that Robert Morris is a true team that can play ball at this level.
Well, we felt like we were going to be pretty good, but you never think or know how good you can be.
Robert Morris opened their 2000 season against Buffalo State, a team which traditionally had given the Colonials trouble. The Bengals had defeated the Colonials in their past 2 home openers, and if the RMC was going to keep their winning streak from the previous season alive, they were going to have to exercise their demons. The game started out with back-to-back turnovers, one from each team, certainly not the start either team anticipated.
Well, no coach likes turnovers. You know, it's an evil part of the game. You know, what you try to teach your kids is how to protect the ball and how important it is to put it away. And so, you know, we did extra drills, you know, to keep from doing that, and all those little things that ensure against some of that stuff.
The Bengals completed a 12-play, 99-yard drive the entire length of the field to give themselves the lead in the second quarter, 14-13. But it was short-lived, as a Jeff Carlo field goal would give RMC the lead going into halftime. From there, Joe Walton and his team stepped on the gas pedal both offensively and defensively as the Colonials held a 30-14 lead before Buffalo State got on the board just one more time with 2 minutes remaining in the game. A failed two-point conversion would yield the final score of 30-20. Robert Morris's exercise, their Demons had won their first game of the 2000 campaign. The Robert Morris team was on an unstoppable pace, outscoring their next three opponents by a harrowing margin of 129-13. The Colonials were charging fast on a collision course with the Dayton Flyers, a team known far too well by RMC, in a matchup that would be a defining one for culture of the Attitude Era. With 4 minutes remaining in the third quarter, the Colonials were dealt with a 13-3 deficit on a day where the offense had been completely and utterly shut down. But it's in adversity where one sees the best from a champion, and the Colonials were out to prove that no obstacle was too big. After Opio Gary took the Dayton kickoff 67 yards to the Flyers' 15-yard line, it took RMC just 50 seconds to get Dante Settles into the end zone. A quick 3-and-out 2 minutes later, and the Colonials were back in possession of the football. Tim Levchik got the Colonials onto Dayton's side of the field on a 27-yard pass to Sean Martin, while Dante Settles did the rest of the work before Nick Daniel broke the plane and shattered the Dayton lead, which just minutes before seemed insurmountable. But this race to the finish line was far from over, and Dayton was not waving the white flag just yet. Faced with a 4th and goal at the 2-yard line, the Flyers chose to go for the touchdown and the lead. But Chris Young had other plans for the Colonials, stuffing Steve McQueen 3 yards behind the line. But Dayton wasn't done yet. With 1:32 remaining with the game on the line, Dayton sat at RMC's 15-yard line, looking to do what they couldn't do on previous drives. The only problem for the Flyers was Joe Austin. Austin's interception at the 5-yard line sealed the win for the Colonials and kept their perfect season alive. The most sensational moment in this season, a moment that would go down in RMC history as their greatest win against the Flyers.
You know, anytime you could beat a Dayton football team, you were overjoyed. And it was something special because, let's face it, Robert Morris hasn't beaten Dayton all that much down through the years. But I do remember the pick that ended the ball game, and you know, how relieved everybody was after that game.
The Colonials left Welcome Stadium with a 5-0 record right at the halfway point of the season, as they came home to host Central Connecticut State. An effortless win against the Blue Devils set up a big-time rivalry match with even bigger implications against the Wagner Seahawks.
I mean, You know, our conference isn't very big, but we've played the same teams for so long now. You know, you've developed a lot of rivalry.
Always been a hostile environment, particularly for a Colonials team led by former New York Jets Joe Walton. But this matchup paired two of the best teams in the Northeast Conference, and a determined Wagner team eager to give the Colonials their very first loss of the season.
Yeah, Wagner at that time was a big run offense. They were running hard, so it was definitely a maturity, you know, willingness to win type of game.
The first half of the game was a deadlocked battle. Brett Hockenberry and Sam Dorsett earned the Colonials their first 2 touchdowns, while Chris Davis busted his way to the longest play RMC had allowed all season on an 85-yard touchdown run for Wagner. Davis would pound in another touchdown for Wagner along with the Darren Plummer touchdown reception to give Wagner a 31-17 lead with 14:09 left in the game. Joe Walton needed another Robert Morris miracle.
They were pretty dirty as a team, you know, going back, playing up there, yeah, and down here they were, you know, better watch out. Keep your head on the swivel. They take shots at you when they weren't looking.
Tim Levchik got RMC on the board thanks to a QB sneak at the goal line, but a missed extra point by Carlo made it seem as though Wagner was destined with victory. Robert Morris would need a touchdown and to complete the 2-point conversion just to get the game to overtime. On the road, in hostile territory, this was a truly daunting feat. Robert Morris would get the ball back with just 4 minutes left. This would be their last chance to save the perfect season. Nick Downs set the scene for Robert Morris as his 24-yard punt return gave the Colonials perfect field position at Wagner's 23-yard line. A touchdown was all but inevitable as Levchik connected once again with Hockenberry for the touchdown. But the Colonials were staring at the biggest 2-point attempt of the entire season, a single play that could define this entire 2000 season. With the entire game on the line, Coach Walton drew up the perfect play. He put the game in the hands of his quarterback, Tim Levchik, who found Nick Daniel for the game-tying conversion. And just like that, it was another Robert Morris miracle. The Colonials would get the ball first in overtime. It took the Colonials just 1 play to get within 10 yards of the goal line, and 2 plays later, Nick Daniel broke the plane one more time for Robert Morris to give the Colonials their first lead since the end of the first quarter. The defining play came when Jamond Riff burst past the defensive line for a 14-yard sack on Wagner quarterback Aaron Smith. The distance to go would prove to be just too much for the Seahawks, and the Robert Morris Colonials would claim their 14th straight win to get their season to 7-0.
Hey, defense! Hey, good job. Hey, it's because of y'all. Good job. It's because of y'all. That's right, buddy. That's right.
First time in 25 games I got an interception. I had to get an interception. I was in a 25-game slump.
He got one.
I had one my freshman year, first game, and now I got one.
The good thing is nobody gave up. Nobody gave up. Everybody had in the heart. Everybody gave everything they had. Intensity, baby. Intensity, boy. Smoke. I told you, baby. I told you live. I told you live. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Everybody went all out. We came through. What plans the team? Colonials on 3. Ain't no quitting on this team. 10-0 all the way. 1, 2, 3. Colonials. We were clowns, guys. We were clowns.
I think Joe Walton's message was clear. You know, set out what you want to do. You know, if this is what you're setting out and aiming to do, then let's accomplish it. He gave us all the right tools that we needed to do it, and we executed it. You know, obviously there's some times where we fumbled and we made huge mistakes, and obviously maybe cost us a turnover or a touchdown. But you know, in the end, it was easy for us to bounce back, listening. You know, we got coached by a great guy.
Robert Morris was just 3 games away from their first perfect season in program history and their second mid-major national title. The Colonials easily did away with NEC powerhouse Sacred Heart, who despite losing just 1 game that season, could not keep up with Walton and his Colonials. Their final home game set up the Colonials against the Great Danes of Albany. While the Great Danes had a modest record of 5-4, they were 5-1 in Northeast Conference play and looking to upset the Colonials for their first ever NEC title. It was a high-scoring affair and different from the types of games that this Robert Morris team was accustomed to, as suddenly a team reliant on their defense was leaning on their offense to keep them ahead. Heading into halftime, the Colonials held a precarious 26-25 lead. Early in the fourth quarter, Albany responded to an RMU touchdown with a 73-yard touchdown pass from Ryan Roeder to Chris Phillis. The Great Danes would fail their two-point attempt to tie the game and now faced a 36-34 deficit. A field goal would give the Danes the lead, but Levchik and the Robert Morris offense wouldn't be satisfied with their two-point lead for long. A touchdown pass from Levchik to Hockenberry gave the Colonials a 9-point lead and a little more wiggle room. From there, the defense completely took over. Joe Austin and Jamond Riff both once again made the timely plays for the Colonials as they had done all season, both coming up with late interceptions. Riff's interception with 2 minutes and 12 seconds left in the game sealed the win for the Colonials. They were now just one win away from a perfect season.
Robert Morris #1, baby! Yeah! 9-0.
The Colonials would head to an area very familiar to Coach Walton, as they would head up to Stony Brook for their final game of the season. While Stony Brook wasn't the toughest opponent RMC had seen this season, they knew the implications of this game.
No, baby. It's a destiny. It's a destiny, baby.
I don't know, baby. That's all I gotta say.
One more to go, baby. One more to go. Stony Brook, we coming for you.
Well, I'll start in the morning. And the thing is, nobody wanted to talk about the fact that they were 9-0, and there was one game left. Joe was a little subdued that day too. After breakfast, I was sitting in the lobby of the hotel, and he walks over and he says, "Do you have a car?" I said, "Yeah." And he had his, blue Robert Morris sweater on with his, collared shirt, cigar hanging out of his mouth, and his glasses down here like this. He said, "Come on, let's take a ride." So he hops into my car. I said, "Where do you want to go, Coach?" He said, "I want to show you around the neighborhood a little bit." Well, it was the neighborhood where he and Ginger and their kids lived when he was the coach of the New York Jets. It was out in central Long Island, out near Islip. And he said, "I want to go buy a newspaper. I want to go grab a newspaper." So we talked the whole way in the car about, this is where Tiger did this, and this is where, Ginger and the kids did that, and, we used to live here, and I used to stop at this place and buy the paper, or we'd stop at this restaurant and eat. And I think he was trying to take some of the pressure off of his own mind and just trying to, take a little deep breath before he had to get back into that bus and go over to the stadium.
You know what to do. We just gotta show it. We just gotta play like
I want a complete game, baby. Complete game.
We're a family.
Hey, Fat Boy, been good playing with you and coaching you. You too, kid. Hey, enjoy this experience, dog.
Sure, guys.
It's all about us right here. Let's make it happen.
Family on three. 1, 2, 3. Family.
The final game against Stony Brook up there was kind of like, we've come so far enough. This is the one we just got to finish off. And I don't think Stony Brook had a chance when we went out, from the opening kickoff right through. They weren't, we were on a mission to win, and we weren't going to let Stony Brook beat us, that's for sure.
All right, there's not much more we can say. We've come a long way since the middle of August. You're in a great position. We've talked about it. We know what we have to do. It's all in your hands. This is Chapter 10. It's there for the taking if you want it, but they are not going to give it to you. You're going to have to go out there and take it. So we want to finish every play, finish every quarter, finish the half, finish the game, and above all, finish this season. Let's go.
Let's go, y'all. Hey, let's not take this team lightly. Whoa, come away quick, y'all. Come away quick, y'all. Hit him hard. Hit him hard. Hey, ain't gonna be no other team like us. 10 on 3. 1, 2, 3. 10-0.
The end of the season. It's up to us right now. We're gonna write this chapter. Chapter 9. I don't want to repeat that one. 8. We don't want to talk about it no more. 10, right here. Have fun, baby. Game time.
Saying this all season, team of destiny. No matter how we win,
That doesn't matter. We win. 10-0. Bobby Moe. In case you didn't know. Let's go. We're gonna do it right now.
We're gonna go 10-0. Darren out way. We're gonna run on top of them and be 10-0. Simple as that. That's all I got to say.
I knew where we were and what we had a chance to do. But again, I think we approached it with this is just another week. You know, you got to forget everything that's happened in the past. It's the same way with having a losing year.
They all kind of went into this business-like mode and got to the stadium and went out on the field and just started playing football. And it probably wasn't until the fourth quarter that they realized, you know what, we're going to go 10-0.
The Colonials would head to an area very familiar to Coach Walton as they would head up to Stony Brook for their final game of the season. While Stony Brook wasn't the toughest opponent RMC had seen this season, they knew the implications of this game. Up 14-0 in the first half, the Colonials were clearly in control of the game, and from there their grasp on the game only got tighter. Up 21-0 going into the third quarter, it was finally sinking in. The journey was almost complete, and history was almost made. As the clock hit 0, it was hysteria from the Colonials sideline. They had done something that no other team in the history of Robert Morris Athletics had ever done. Completed a perfect season, 10-0. A mark that would go down in history as one of the greatest seasons ever. As the celebrations commenced, the Colonials claimed their second mid-major national title. Even 18 years after their perfect season, the lessons of Coach Walton in that team will stick with his players to this day.
Well, I mean, we were so confident that we was going to win. And we had champagne. I don't know if y'all know. We had Kyler and them guys that bought a whole couple boxes of champagne. We snuck on the bus and we took in the locker room. Then after the game, we was popping champagne. It was a good time, man.
It felt good. It was a major accomplishment. You know what I mean? It never been done here before. So it was nice for us to truly set the bar. You know, to be able to say, hey, we did a clean sweep of a season. You know, we knew what was ahead of us. We knew what the challenge was, and we actually accomplished it.
There was a lot of hugs, a lot of celebrations. You know, I remember coaching, you know, or not coach, hugging Coach Walton and telling him, you know, thank you, you know, because that was sort of like my last hoorah as a GA. And I'm like, you know, it hit me like I'm done coaching, you know, what's next for me? And but we just did something that no other team has done. And that no matter if someone else goes undefeated ever again, you know, that team did it first.
Oh, I think everybody was excited and elated, and you know, all the adjectives you can think of. I guess that's the best way to, you know, how could you not be excited? You gotta be pretty cold not to, and that's what you play for, you know, for the opportunity to do something like that.
That's how we celebrate it. 10-0, 17 in a row. NEC, national champs. What? My name is Horse. I get sacked for course. You can't fight for each other. I am the G-Man. Bobby Moe, what you know about 10-0? Bobby Moe, what you know about 10-0? Bobby Moe, what you know about 10-0?
How many teams in Robert Morris athletic history are perfect? You know, it was a perfect season. 10 10-0. You can't get any better than that unless you play 11 games. They finished off a 17-game win streak dating back to the season prior. Some of their names are still in the record books. These guys are going to be remembered for what they did forever.
First of all, I caught a 2-point conversion. Did you see the hands? Second of all, I got a sack. Oh, yeah!
It set the bar was set at a good level. You know, we had won a couple conferences. You know, 97 we won that ECAC Bowl. 96 we won the ECAC Bowl. You know, to go undefeated against, you know, the teams in our conference, you know, it was a pretty significant, you know, because we always had, you know, 7-3 or, you know, 9-2 or, you know, whatever. We always had a loss or two, you know, and to be able to say you beat everybody that year was a pretty awesome feat.
I think it definitely, you know, put Robert Morris on the map for, you know, a lot of reasons. You know, a lot of schools use football and sports as that tier, that platform to get to that next level or that next step and, you know, what the school's trying to achieve. And, you know, that season, I think, set truly a high standard.
We were 9-1 2 years ago, and he said, I had a chance to be 10-0, and he said, I just had a feeling we weren't going to make it. And I'd say, well, you know, you always, and then I relate to the high school coaches too, that I learned from George Allen. Take it one at a time, 1 week at a time, 1 day at a time, and make sure you accomplish what you want to accomplish that day and that week. And then for that time, and the rest of it will take care of itself.
Some lessons that I took away are that nothing is given, everything is earned. No matter how much you think you deserve something, there's always going to be somebody there that wants it as much as you do, and may want your position, want your job, whatever the case might be. And so I think for me, I learned a lot about preparation. You have to show up every day. You have to put in the extra work. You have to be so.
Being able to take constructive criticism. I think we've learned that a lot here. Playing under Coach Walton and Bad Rad. Me personally, I know I have, and I've taken a lot of it. That and effective planning. You know, learning how to plan and execute. I use it a lot in my profession, being able to, you know, plan things out, execute them, put things in place and perspective and things like that.
Well, my whole defense, I run as Rad's defense. I just tweaked it here and there. I kind of ended up with a playbook when I left.
Just to be focused and finish. You know, the big message 1 year was finish. Finish what you set out to do. You know, just start something and have a goal and try to finish, try to acquire it.
But perhaps greater than the legacy of the 2000 Colonials and their improbable run is the legacy of Walton himself, the man who from the very beginning was the architect of RMC football.
You know, there aren't many, especially in what you would consider modern times, there aren't many who can say they started a program. So his legacy is the foundation here. It's why we're here. It's why we're in a stadium that bears his name. He started it, and the fact, again, I think it's just amazing that we excelled from the start. I think that's one of the big reasons why, you know, like how you know something that happened, but you don't know exactly how it happened. That's you know, he was part of that. He built this foundation, and it's why we're here. It's you know, I think it's just a part of the whole growth of RMU over the past 25, 30 years.
Without him, we wouldn't be able to have the fun, the memories that we have. Not only did he help with he helped build everything. He helped create a lot of relationships. The friendships that I have, I can pick up the phone, call any of the guys I played with, even the guys I coached. You know, we are a big community, you know, big family. We come together, we love seeing each other. You know, it wouldn't have happened without him.
You know, the first word that comes to mind for me would be a winner. I think his legacy is that of a winner. He, you know, came into a program, a situation at a late age in his life, and it was apparent to me the first time I sat down with him that it doesn't matter that he's sitting in this little office in John Jay, this little teeny office, no windows, and I'm thinking, what is this guy doing here? And all he wanted to talk about was football, and he got up and he was writing out plays on a whiteboard, and I'm like, this guy is here to win and win now. It doesn't matter what the situation is.
Joe Walton will always be Robert Morris football. He set it very high. I think he accomplished it when he came here. I don't think that'll ever be washed away in any shape, form, or fashion. I think one of the biggest things I was glad to see is that stadium was named after Joe Walton.
Joe Walton, I think he's a guy that really loved football. He always said, I think his wife said, that he found his niche coaching at Robert Morris. You know, there wasn't the pressure that they had, the big lights like the NFL. I think he really found his calling there. I think it's why he stayed so long. I'm sure he probably got some offers after a few winning seasons and stayed. You know, I think that's what stands out, that he, you know, was dedicated to a program that started from nothing. You know, we practiced on a softball field and we wore old Jets uniforms at practice, so it was like, and we had old Steelers gear. So I think it was a guy that just really cared about football, and he wanted to pass it on to kids that probably wouldn't have got a shot somewhere else.
You know, Coach Walton brought in donors, he brought in media, he brought in good players, he brought in good coaches. You know, Coach Walton put Robert Morris on the map.
I mean, he won, you know, and you know, if you're an outsider looking in, you know, people go, oh yeah, you know, hey, Coach Walton won. You know, there were several years that we were in conference championships. You know, in 2010 we made it to the, you know, we were the first NEC team to make it to the playoffs. You know, you can't win every year. You know, nobody can win every year. So, you know, for him to do what he did with what we had, you know, and see it grow into what we have now, you know, I mean, a lot of these guys don't realize how much work and effort it took to get us to where we are now with our stadium and you know, and all the stuff that everybody kind of takes for granted almost a little bit.
First of all, architect, creator, the guy who came in here and built the entire scheme. He built the entire program. When they named Joe Walton the head coach at Robert Morris University, you just had this feeling that things were going to happen. They bring in a guy with all of that history, all of that knowledge, all of that ability, and from a guy who got his picture taken and they had to go buy him a football to hold in that first season, to a 10-0 season, to a few seasons later seeing a stadium built on this campus when no one ever even dreamed that there will be a football team here. And the stadium is named in his honor because of all that great work that he did. And I'm not just talking about wins and losses, I'm talking about getting guys who might not have otherwise had a chance to teach the lessons that he has taught these guys to be good people in their lives. I said earlier that, you know, he taught a lot of people how to be good people. You know, he's just that kind of guy. He's an influence, a positive influence, a leader, a mentor, and just an all-around good person. He's one of the best people I've ever met.
There is no Robert Morris football without Joe Walton. There just really isn't. What he brought to that university, and I'm just going to say this, how much that school has changed in the 22 years. 22 years really isn't a long time. And they were talking about closing the doors back then, and that's real. There weren't a lot of attractions at Moon campus. We used to practice on the softball field that was above John Jay. So really the bottom line to that is there is no Robert Morris football. Everything that everyone experienced today without Joe Walton. And as I say, and also in equal part too to Dan Radakovich, Bad Rad. Rad oversaw our recruiting. And again, all of our, I mean, look how many people's careers have, I don't know if that's correct language, but how many careers have started because of Coach Walton and Dan Radakovich going to Robert Morris. They made a great selection back then, and it's just going to continue to pay off for Robert Morris moving forward.
I like to think that I sent a bunch of, pretty good young men out into the world, and what else?
One thing I do each year at the beginning of the season, usually at the beginning of training camp, is to tell all our players what I expect from each of them and what they can expect from me. Hard work, discipline, enthusiasm, and the desire to win each and every week. They must learn that winning teams play together and work hard not to make mistakes. They can never look ahead, only look at this week's opponent. And above all, hate to lose. Once they grasp that concept and put it into practice, they will be on their way to reaching their full potential. I also tell them, what is the price for success? It is simple. You must be dedicated and determined to accomplish your goal. You must learn to focus on how to win. Not only when the circumstances are good, but also in the midst of adverse circumstances and setbacks. Nothing worthwhile has ever been accomplished without work, pain, or obstacles. Nothing has ever been achieved that is worthwhile without total commitment. Remember what it takes: good leadership, hard work, discipline, enthusiasm, and a good family atmosphere. So those are the things that I talk to the team about before each season. This team more than any other I have ever coached, took all of my words and put them into practice. They blended together to be a team and a family. We always say that teams win and individuals lose. I'm very proud of the 2000 Robert Morris Colonials, not only because we went 10-0, but because of the character and heart we displayed throughout the year. I thank you, the players, the coaching staff, and support staff for a truly great season. A season that I don't think any of us will ever forget. And always remember, finish, finish, finish. Finish what you start out to do. Thank you.